Hello, everyone. Welcome to the June 2014 Network Plus Study Group. This is a monthly study group that we do based on the questions that you send me throughout the month. This month, we kind of skipped a month. I had every intention of doing a study group for May. So if you're rewinding and looking through the archives and you're wondering, where is the study group for May? This is it. It's just not May. I did it as quickly as I can. I had a little bit of a challenge getting over a cold, and the worst thing there is for somebody on a microphone is to be coughing and wheezing and talking like this the whole time about Network Plus. So instead of doing that, I decided maybe we'll just wait a couple of weeks, and trust me, it's better for everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have so many things to talk about today. I'm mixing it up a little bit. For those of you that have followed before, this live study group is also a call-in show. We'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm taking calls, though, in the second half of the show. So I know some people are already calling up to ask questions. So we're going to do quite a bit first without taking your calls, and then we're going to jump to the calls. But I'm not leaving you out completely. I have things for you to do during that time frame. So we'll get to that in just a bit. I have lots of things for you to do. As I mentioned, this is a monthly study group, and it's really sponsored by you. I have corporate sponsors that help me with this, but I also have you that are watching the videos. All of my videos, of course, are available to watch absolutely free. I don't have portions of videos. I don't have a subset of my videos. Every single one of my Network Plus videos are available to watch for free every minute out there on the internet, on YouTube, or just go to freenetworkplus.com, freenetworkplus.com, and you can go straight to that, or just go to the Professor Messer website. There's menus right at the top. You can pull that down and find all of the Network Plus videos. I have also got an opportunity, though, for you to purchase. If you'd like to take these videos and have them offline, you're not connected to the internet, your network connection is very slow, you can purchase a copy of these. You can purchase either the audio itself, maybe you'd like it for drive time back and forth to work. I have just the MP3s that you can purchase, or you can purchase everything, MP3s and PDF files and video files that you can put on your mobile devices or watch on your computer. A lot going on there. If you'd like to keep track of what we do all the time, every month, every week, every second, I try to update things on Twitter and on Facebook and on YouTube. Just go to professormesser.com/Facebook/Twitter/YouTube. You'll find it all there on the Professor Messer website. There is quite a bit that has happened throughout the week. But before we get started into the details of Network Plus, I want to learn more about you. So for those of you that haven't watched before, this is an interactive piece. I'm talking to you, but now you get to talk to me. I want to ask a question of you, and I have a lot of questions for you this month. Make sure that you have your mobile device available. Maybe pop out a new window in your browser, because I have things that I would like you to answer. In fact, if you're trying to figure out a good reason to use that QR code reader on your mobile device, here's a great way to do it, because I've got QR codes for you as well. The first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to ask you how long you've been studying for Network Plus. I want to know from you exactly how long you've been studying with this. I hope this is taking you to the right link. I'm looking at the numbers up top. I think we did this last time, and the numbers keep changing and moving around. So we're going to see if that actually goes to the right place for the Network Plus piece. I've got a lot of other questions for you to answer as well. In fact, let me try it. Just go to govote.at, and it will pop up a message that says, yeah, put in a number here. And you see it's a very simple screen, so it's perfect for a mobile device. And you can put in that message. Oh, yep, it said that's the wrong number. So let me put the right number. It's live, everyone. Watch what we do here. Watch this magic that occurs as I put in the correct number. No, some of you are getting there, but some of you are not. It is 663257. Look at that. Boom. 663257. Well, some of you are getting there. So that link's working for some. Probably the QR code is working. It's the other button that's not working. Yep, in the chat room, they're saying, you don't even know what you're doing here. You've got completely the wrong numbers in front of you. That's okay. We're fixed now. Go out and vote, because I want to know how long you've been doing this. You've been working on your Network Plus, and if you're like me, you kind of get into it, and then something happens, and you have to put it away for a little while and come back. I have certifications I'm studying for all the time. I have technical books I'm reading all the time. And of course, I get excited about things. This last week, Apple introduced a new programming language, completely new, called Swift. And of course, they provided a free book so that you can learn Swift. Well, who can resist that? I need to learn Swift now. So I go read the book. But of course, I've got other things going on. So I'll put that down for a while, then I'll go back to it. And you can kind of see this as you're voting. You can see some people have been doing this more than a year. A lot of us are just getting into it. You need the study group and to learn more about what's going on. So thank you, chat room. You were made sure that that is working for me and getting the pieces going. If you are in the chat room, if you're watching and want to participate in chat, if you're over on the YouTube side, you notice there's no chat. You have to go to the ProfessorMesser.com website. And if you go to ProfessorMesser.com/live, there's a chat at the bottom of every page, and you can watch the video and have the chat there at the same time. The chat is also something I'm watching. So as we go through different topics, I'm going to have things pop up on my screen as well. So I'll be able to see what you are doing. And you can, of course, participate in there. I notice a few of you sent me some private messages and they pop up and suddenly I just get rid of them. And you're wondering what happened. Well, I'm doing a few things here, and the private messages, I'm sorry, we just can't do when I'm here live on the air doing those things. There is a good mix, I think, this time of everyone. Let's make this screen completely large. I'm missing a little piece at the bottom. There we go. So we've got most of you less than 3 months working on Network Plus. And I think that's usually what we see. We're at the beginning of the summer, and people are just starting their classes. They're getting into or have just finished another class. Now they want to work towards a separate certification. So we're starting out now with a piece of that. So as we go through things today, you're going to find that I'm going to hit a lot of different topics about a lot of different things. And I try to focus on things that you're going to be able to work with and be able to use as you're going through the study process. I would say most of the time it takes somewhere around 3 to 6 months to study for one of these certifications. For Network Plus, you may be able to get that down closer to 3 than 6. So this may be a thing that you work all summer, you study up on it, and by the time the fall comes, you're already finished with that certification. So it's a good idea to look at how you're going to study and how much and work on that. Some of you in the chat room, congratulations, Chris and Jeffrey, for the past week, past Network Plus. So maybe they can give us some tips. Remember, if you have taken the Network Plus, you'd like to give people tips, you can't talk about what was on the exam. So you really have to talk in very broad strokes. Know your topics, know these things, reference back to the objectives. What worked for you? Was it reading books? Was it watching videos? Those types of things can certainly be discussed. And that's what we will be doing as well, to talk about some of those things. I get a lot of questions when you subscribe to this. You send me your questions. A lot of questions revolve around the Network Plus certification. For those of you that are studying for Security Plus, you know that the Security Plus exam was just updated at the beginning of the year. So the Security Plus will be retired at the end of this calendar year. When people say, well, if they're changing around Security Plus, are they changing around Network Plus? Well, as you can see, the Network Plus was introduced and released, this version of it, which is called the N10005. That version was released on December the 1st of 2011. And generally, these last about 3 years, somewhere in there, plus or minus. So you can expect somewhere around December of this year, if CompTIA remains doing the same thing over and over again, that they may release a new version of Network Plus. Now, keep in mind that when they do that, there is generally an overlap period. So the Security Plus, for instance, which was released a couple of months ago, you've got about 6 to 9 months of a time where both of those exams can be taken. So I expect exactly the same thing to happen with the Network Plus as well. If they release it in December, they're probably going to give you at least 6 months, if you're already studying for this version, to go out and take it. And the bonus is, of course, whether you take this version or whether you take what will ultimately be a new version, it's the same certification. So if you've been studying for 6 months and suddenly they introduce a new version, don't feel that you're compelled now to go work on that new version. You can still keep working on the current one. That way, all that work that you did, you can still apply towards taking that new exam. So do not worry about that piece. You will be just fine to be able to work with those. There is quite a lot that we're also doing here at Messer Studios. One of the things that I want to show you is some of the things that I'm working on. There is a Network Plus study guide. In fact, let me show you the breakdown of how this works. This study guide I created I took all the notes and everything from every one of my videos. And a lot of people will say, I need to know more about the proxy piece and the IPsec tunneling. And I want to know the breakdown of how I look at the subnetting and understanding all those charts and all of the graphs and natting, all those things. Well, I took everything and put it into a PDF file that you can purchase. So if you're taking notes yourself, great, use those notes. That will work fine. If you're somebody like me that prefers to watch the video and now I need notes, this might be something to consider. All these notes are delivered as a PDF file, so you can download them immediately, and they've just got everything on there. Every picture I have from all of my videos that apply to what we were doing, I put into this PDF file. So it's 11 pages worth, and I've got pieces in there. And it's great that I get to work with people that are giving me feedback on this. So this is changing often. If you've already purchased this, you may want to consider downloading a new version, because I've changed and tweaked things very slightly, made some things a little clearer to understand, and I've tried to make it at a price that everybody can afford. So it also keeps the website going. All the revenue here goes back to keeping the website bandwidth and the costs associated with that. It's very common on my website to have about $1,000 a month is what we're spending right now on keeping just the website going, because there's multiple web servers, there's load balancers, there's a separate database server in the back end, there's reverse proxies to get in. There's a lot of moving parts. So it is sometimes a challenge to keep all of those things moving, and every bit of revenue we can get from the website to keep that going certainly helps. So it's just something to consider as we're going through these questions today. And boy, do I have some questions for you. So here's what we're going to do. This is a little different than other study groups we've done. I've just created a bunch of questions, and we're just going to shotgun through all of these questions that I've created. So get your mobile devices handy. I've made sure the QR codes and everything work with these. So hopefully we're going to be okay there. And we're just going to go step through these one by one to see what's there. I'm not taking any calls yet, as I mentioned, until later on in the show. We're going to go through these questions first, and then I'll take direct questions from you on the call-in lines right after that. If you're interested in calling in, you can certainly call in. The numbers are at professormesser.com/live. So get your QR code readers handy. Let's go to our first question of the study group, which is, which of these devices would you be most likely to find in something called a DMZ? So when you go to govote.at and you go to 476478, you're going to get these questions. And by the way, no answering in the chat room. You may not answer in the chat room. I will ban you. I will delete you from the face of the earth. So, but please go to the webpage and answer this question. Your options are, which of these devices would be most likely to find in DMZ? A web server, a tablet computer, a color laser printer, or a USB connected hard drive? Well, this is sort of a multi-step question. You have to first know what a DMZ is, and then you have to know what goes into a DMZ. I try to make these questions so there's multiple steps to get to the final answer on here, and that's commonly what you will see on the CompTIA exam. They like to not give you a definition and you give the response to that definition. They're giving you a question that makes you step through and think through a number of steps to find the right answer. And it's very often something like this, where they're asking for the most likely, or they're asking for the best response. But don't be thrown by that. When CompTIA asks you for the best response, what they're really asking you for is something that's very clear. There are no trick questions on these exams. They are very, very specific. And if you know the answer, it jumps right out at you. If you don't know the answer, then it might be a little more vague. One of the challenges with going into some of these questions is you really have to look at the question as its own standalone entity. Don't take anything else into account. Look at the question and don't consider other things that might sit outside of the question, and I think you'll be just fine. So we have about 15 responses. Which of these devices would you be most likely to find in DMZ? Web server, tablet, computer, color laser printer, or USB connected hard drive? I'm going to wait till we get about 20 responses, and then we're going to see what you think with this. Notice I kind of hide this, and nobody knows what anybody's voting on, and everybody's being real good in the chat room and not spoiling it for anyone else. We got about 19 responses. Let's see what your answers were relating to most likely to find in a DMZ. I thought the color laser printer might throw a few people off with that one, which is the reason I put it in there. None of you should have chosen USB connected hard drive, and indeed you did not. Nobody chose tablet computer. Doesn't even make sense to go in a DMZ. A DMZ, of course, is a demilitarized zone. It's such a big fighting type military term, a demilitarized zone. But it's really part of the network that we carve out and set aside that is not on the inside of the network, but it's not on the outside of the network. It's right in the middle. It is the demilitarized zone, very much like a demilitarized zone that you would see these days. A very popular one is between North and South Korea, for instance. There is a very, very well-established demilitarized zone. Nobody steps in that zone. If you step in that zone, it's bad news for everybody. This is exactly the same type of situation, but in this case, we want people from the outside to be able to access servers and other devices within that DMZ, but we don't want them coming all the way inside of the network. And that's why we create these DMZs. Usually it is a zone or section of the network that we carve out using our firewall. And the firewall takes everybody coming from the outside and redirects them to the DMZ and prevents them from coming inside to the internal network. That DMZ usually has services in it. So when you go to Google, you go to Facebook, you go to ESPN, you go to CNN, you're hitting a web server, and that web server is probably in a section of the network that is specifically designed to provide you with that service. So it's usually some big servers. I just mentioned on my website that I've got reverse proxies and I've got web servers and database servers. That's what you'd find in a DMZ. You wouldn't put a printer in a DMZ. If you were connecting to CNN, you're not printing to a printer on CNN. You're not connecting to a tablet that's somewhere on the CNN facility. You're not connecting to a USB hard drive. Those are things that you would have local to you. They would not be in a DMZ. And I didn't fool very many people with this question. 25 of you said, yeah, that's a web server. And that's exactly what you would find when you're working in a DMZ. I tend to find when I start working in these environments where there is a lot of security involved, and really DMZ is a security type technique, that's when we really get into the ideas of using a firewall and thinking about the process and how does the application work. And some of those things can be really challenging when you're first setting up a DMZ. How do you configure that? There's routing involved. There are security rules involved. Fortunately, there's so many people that have configured DMZs before that we don't often get into a situation where that is a bit of a concern. Let's do another one. Let's do another question. Since we're hopping through these questions today and going through, I've got another question for you. This one really more core networking than anything else. The question is, what service uses UDP 123? Hey, that rhymes. So what is it? What runs on UDP 123? Don't answer in the chat room. In fact, some of you, if you know, you probably know without me giving you any options. But I do have some options when you visit govote.at at 691789. And the answers that I have for you is UDP 123 Simple Network Management Protocol. Is it Network Time Protocol? Is it Internet Control Message Protocol? Or is it Trivial File Transfer Protocol? So you've got a few of them there to work through. Whenever you're working on the exam, and this is the reason I created this question, a lot of the questions came in, is how do I memorize all these port numbers? How do I memorize all these protocols? Part of the challenge with working in security and working with networks and trying to understand how the traffic flows is that you're going to be working with ports and protocols a lot. And a lot of them you just start to remember automatically. When somebody says, oh, I need to set a firewall rule that will allow web traffic. Well, web traffic is TCP port 80. And after a while, it just becomes a second nature. You know, nobody thinks about when they drive their car, how does this work again? We put the key in and we turn it, right? I probably need to Google this. I'm not quite sure. Do we move something? It's just natural. It's almost muscle memory where we are doing it. We don't have to think about it. Same thing with ports and protocols. It seems so odd to us initially with these ports and protocols, but after a while, it just becomes second nature, and you'll see it and you'll recognize what it is. For the Network Plus exam, it's really memorization. If you've never worked with these before, get some flashcards, work with those, and get a feel for what those might be when you're working with them. So we've got about 21 responses. What service uses UDP 123? Let's look at the results and see what you said. So, oh, good. We've got kind of a mix across this. We've got Simple Network Management Protocol. That's SNMP. That's a protocol that's used by usually a management software or management server that you would install. And that software goes out to your routers, to your switches, to your firewalls, to your servers, to all of the devices on your network. And it gathers information about the health of those devices. How's the CPU in that device? How much traffic is going through a particular port? What's the temperature inside of that device? There's so many different metrics and statistics you can get. And the simple network management protocol does that, does not use UDP 123. What about the Internet Control Message Protocol? In fact, that is an IP protocol. It doesn't even use port numbers, so that one we can throw out immediately. Sorry, those two folks that chose that one. Trivial File Transfer Protocol, you could have almost chosen that one if you were trying to think about UDP and how it works and those pieces. But indeed, everybody did choose. The vast majority of you did choose the right answer. The Network Time Protocol is the service that uses UDP 123. And it's one of those things that you can almost remember that 123 like a clock. So maybe use your own mnemonics or your own way of thinking about using that UDP 123 when you're working with it. I think whenever you start working with these protocols, you almost don't even think about them anymore. In fact, before this started, I was looking at the protocols that were in my computer. In fact, I've got, we're on my screen right now, so let's have a look at it. Here's my clock. And I was looking at the date and time preferences on my clock. I'm running Mac OS 10, but your device that you're running, Windows, works exactly the same way. The date and time on my computer is configured to set date and time automatically, and you have some choices as to where you can go to set that clock automatically. Mine is set to appleamericastime.apple.com. Now, it doesn't say on here, this is NTP. This is Network Time Protocol. In fact, most people looking at this wouldn't have any idea what you're talking about. What do you mean? UDP 123, Network Time Protocol, NTP. I have no idea what you're talking about. But a box that says set date and time automatically, that's what that is. So if you're trying to troubleshoot a problem dealing with the way that routers, switches, firewalls, servers, workstations all get their time update, then you're probably working with an NTP type issue. And that's certainly where you would start your process, is understanding, does this work, does it not work, to be able to get that to go through. This is where some of the challenges when trying to troubleshoot and trying to remember all these things become a bit of a challenge. But of course, you've always got Google. After a while, it just becomes second nature, though. If you are configuring firewalls or you're setting personal firewalls on devices, you learn pretty quick what those responses or what those options might be and what those port numbers are. Okay, let's keep going. This is going pretty well, isn't it? We got a few things going on. And I have another question for you. This question, we're going to shift gears a little bit. This is more of a definition answer kind of question. So you need to know what these things are, but I've tried to make the questions a little bit more descriptive. So you're going to have to think this one through. So next question on our list, get your QR code readers ready. Don't answer in the chat room. If you go to govote.at and answer 563273, put that in the box, you'll be presented with the question of, what is an MX record? What is an MX record? Well, of course, in the early 80s, the DJ MX had a lot of records. No, it was it's a choice of four things for you. The hard drive boot sector descriptor. Is that an MX record? Is it a CPU storage register? That sounds like something it could be. An IP pointer to an email server? Or is an MX record a network bandwidth limiter? It can almost be any one of these things. Try to make the answers something that would give you pause to try to figure that piece out. What is an MX record for this? Let's look at it here. Here we go. That's a little bit better. I'll pop up the QR code for those of you that may not have gotten it. Is it a hard drive boot sector descriptor? Is it a CPU storage register? Is it an IP pointer to an email server? Or is it a network bandwidth limiter? Now, MX records and other records you might work with are part of the CompTIA exam. Make sure you go look at those exam objectives if you have not already. And I'll say it multiple times during this, that you need to know what is on the objectives. If you don't know what the objectives are and you walk in the door of the room, then you'll have no idea what's on the exam. I get questions and things all the time from people. I walked in and I got a lot of things I wasn't expecting. How is that possible? Oh, didn't you read the exam objectives? And they say, what exam objectives? I have no idea what you're talking about, exam objectives. That is absolutely what you should be doing. You should know what every possible topic is for the exam, and you should have a look at that. Okay, 21 responses now. Let's have a look at what some of you may have answered, and the results are, what's an MX record? 2 of you said hard drive boot sector descriptor. 3 of you said CPU storage register. Nobody said a network bandwidth limiter. And again, I didn't fool anybody with this one. 19 of you said it is an IP pointer to an email server. And this is where you start getting into real specifics with DNS. This is all about the records that are used with DNS. And maybe I could bring up some examples of this and let you see exactly what's there. If I can, I'm going to use one of the commands that you will need to know on your Network Plus. And I will... Let's get all. Can I do all of the ones I want you to see? I want to do an example of looking at DNS. You will need to know the NS lookup command if you're running in Windows. You also need to know the dig command or what it does. Dig doesn't come with Windows. There is, as I mentioned in my videos, a dig, a type of dig that has been created for Windows. You can find it. You got to download this package and then pull the dig executable out of it. It's not a simple thing. But you can do that if you're working in dig. So go out and look at some of the options for doing that. For instance, let's do one. I'm going to pull up a few things here because maybe I want to see what my MX record might be. And we're going to use NS lookup because I think NS lookup can really be the one that everybody can use. Let me flip over so you can see what I see. Let's see if I can remember the command myself. NS lookup, of course, is the command that will look up IP addresses. If you use NS lookup and I just put in www.professormesser.com, it shows you information about Professor Messer. In fact, there are 2 IP addresses that you could connect to right now and get to professormesser.com. That's a feature of the reverse proxy that I'm using. So I've got some multiple options available that you could connect to 162, 159, 247, 164, 246.164. So there's redundancy built into this, and your computer somewhere else may get a different answer. If you're in a different part of the world, if you're on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast, you may get a different set here. So let's try some different things with this. If I just do NS lookup, and I use a command to set my query section to MX. So MX is part of that. And let me make it so you can see that a little better. There's my set Q equals MX on here. I just did NS lookup and hit enter, and I got just a greater than prompt. And from the greater than prompt, you can type in a lot of different things like set Q equals MX. Now I can finish this. I'm just going to put in professormesser.com, and it gives you information about my mail exchanger. That's what MX stands for. And you can see in my case that my mail exchanger is mxa.mailgun.org. All of my servers are at Rackspace, and Rackspace's email servers that they have, they're separate to Rackspace. They have their own naming functions. I think their own branding of their email piece is called Mailgun. So I use Mailgun as my front end for everybody that sends me mail, and it gives me options of things I can do with the mail. I can send it to spam. I can forward it somewhere else. I can do a lot because I've got this very front end that I'm using with Mailgun. So what this says, if somebody's sending me mail, you type it into Gmail or Yahoo, Google then says, well, I have no idea how to get to Professor Messer. Let me find out what the mail exchange is for that. It does a query the same way I just did, finds out that it's mxa.mailgun.org. Then it's very easy to do a reverse of that. And in fact, let's use dig so you can see what that's like. Dig mxa.mailgun.org. And you can see the IP address of that will then pop up and say that's 50.56.21.176. Google or Yahoo says, great, I'm sending mail off to you. And they talk via SMTP, the Simple Mail Transport Protocol, to send that email ultimately to me. Whew, a lot of steps go through doing this. Every time you send mail, every time you try to connect to Google, you do DNS queries. There's ARPs that go out if you've never been on the network. There's you get IP addresses. The browser kicks in. It's port numbers in use. That's a very good example, though, of why that MX record is really good. In the chat room, some people said, yes, there's other websites that can tell you a lot more about the MX configuration, like mxtoolbox.com, which is another good one. There's a lot of good sites out there that have utilities. So if you don't have dig, you don't have NSLOOKUP, you don't understand or know how to pop open the console on your computer, and you've never worked with that before, you've got some other options at mxtoolbox.com, for instance. Here we go. You can simply put in a domain name, professormesser.com, and do an MX lookup. You can see my piece there. So it gives you information. In fact, here it is. Not only tells you, here's the mailgun.org and the IP addresses, which we just saw. Notice my time to live is 5 minutes. So if I change my IP address, everybody gets an update in 5 minutes. My time to lives are intentionally very, very, very short. I do that through a DNS provider called Hover, which are awesome. And I should probably put them on my website. I don't get anything by you going there. I just find they're fantastic from a DNS perspective. You can do a blacklist check on this. If you're running a mail server, and especially if you're on a shared mail server, I was on a shared IP address, a shared server from Mailgun, and somebody was spamming. It wasn't me, it was someone else. But since I'm sharing the same IP address, I got blacklisted. None of you were getting my emails. So I had to go to Mailgun and say, I need to buy my own IP address so that nobody else creates problems for me. But you can do a blacklist check to see, is this person blacklisted? And that's something you can't do with NSLOOKUP. You can't do that with dig. And so you can see, am I good everywhere? Looks like I am. Nobody hates me. Yay. But this is where you may want to find out, why is somebody on AT&T not getting my mail? Why is somebody on these sites not getting my mail? This is a good way to tell by using some of these tools that are in things like MX Toolbox. So you get to play around with those. So be able to see that. Can it blacklist the NSA? If only. That would be great if we were able to blacklist the NSA. Unfortunately, no. We cannot blacklist the NSA. Okay, I got more questions for you. We're not done yet. I got lots of stuff to go through. I made a lot of questions for you guys. This is working okay. How's the chat room? Is this good? Are we doing things? We're not taking calls, by the way, for those who've joined us. We're not taking calls to the second half of the show. We're just going through these questions. We're shotgunning them based on the questions you asked me. I kind of mixed them up a bit and made some Q&A about it. So I'd love some feedback either during the show or afterwards. Feel free to let me know what you thought of this, because we'll just keep doing it this way. All right, I have another question for you. Again, no answering in the chat room. This one deals a little bit more with wireless. And on the Network Plus exam, there is a lot of wireless that you're working with that you'll find that you have to work to deal through. There's so many different wireless standards. They all work differently. They all use different things, different technologies to make that work. So let's ask a technology question about this. The technology question, get your QR code readers ready, is which of these wireless technologies use something called AES? Which of these use AES? Whatever AES is, I want to know what uses it. And your options are going to be WPA2, TKIP, WEP, or WPA, which I guess is different than WPA2, isn't it? So one of those uses AES, whatever that is. So which one is that? If you go to govote.at and go to 144389, you can answer that questions. I've got a few things to step through with that. So wireless, of course, is very big. It's only going to get bigger because obviously in the Network Plus exam, you have to know 802.11a, 802.11b, 802.11g, and 802.11n. And of course, the latest standard, emerging standard, 802.11ac. I mean, they ran out of letters. They had to now double up the letters so that they could go even further. So that's what they do. They go all the way to Z, and then they start with AA, AB, AC, AD, and et cetera, et cetera. The govote.at will take you to that page, and you're certainly welcome to respond to that. One of the challenges with all of these standards is there are differences with every single standard. I mean, we started off with wireless, and we made a lot of mistakes with encryption with wireless, and we had to change encryption types. We had to change the way that we send traffic across these wireless networks, and all of those use different technologies. And that's why I wanted to ask this question. So it would get you thinking about what different technology is AES, and then how does it apply into wireless? And that's why I asked the question about just generically AES. You may know what AES is, and if you know that, you still have to know which one of these technologies it applies to. Again, I try to do these two-step questions for you to try to get that one going. This is one that I would, if you don't know it, this is a great opportunity to learn it because AES is something you not only find on wireless networks, you will find it with other technologies as well. So we've got about 23 responses. Let's see what you answered with this one. And 21 of you said WPA2. Again, you guys are right on the money with this. I think somebody's doing some Googling in the background. Do not Google. Or maybe you guys are just smart. You know these things. WPA2 uses AES, and it may be because of the changes that occurred over time makes that AES stick in our mind. So for those of you that have never worked with AES, it has a kind of a boring name. It's the Advanced Encryption Standard. That's it, AES. But it's a really well-established encryption standard at this point. It was one that the federal government, the National Institute of Standards Technology, NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, said we need a really good encryption type. Let's go out and put one together. And it was really interesting how they put together the exact algorithms, the cipher to make this happen. And it's so good that we started using it in a lot of places. And it really came along right at the right time because for those of you that remember, we broke WEP. WEP was one of the original encryption types in wireless, and we found a way to break it. And this is one of the challenges you have with encryption. Encryption is great. It's fantastic. AES is wonderful until the point where somebody finds a weakness in it. And because cryptography itself is so complex, it's not one of these things you stumble in on. You have to get very smart people in a room to really think about these ciphers and these algorithms to try to determine what's the best way to break this one. And we found a way to break it with WEP. So we stopped using WEP, but we needed some other way to encrypt data. And we came up with others for WPA. The problem is that even with WPA and the TKIP that we were using for WPA, there's even limitations with that one, but we needed something that was simple enough that we could run on old hardware while everybody migrated to something that was more powerful. And the more powerful encryption mechanism here, the encryption standard, the advanced one that we created here was AES, and we put that into WPA2. So if you're running WPA2 today, you're using this AES encryption methodology inside of the traffic going back and forth. And that's why whenever we get on a wireless network that is secured with WPA2, we feel so good about doing that. We aren't scared that the traffic is going to be read or seen by someone else, as long as we have good passphrases in place, as long as we're using something like 802.1x that's able to use different keys for everybody and different authentication methods for everybody. It's a great way to do it. I think that that wireless technology in itself is fascinating. It's just so hard to keep up with all of the pieces. In my videos, I tried to give you the high points. And in the Network Plus exam, they're not going to want to know the history of AES. It's just something that's useful for you to know so that you can apply it back to how things really happened in the real world. But I think that once you start using it and looking at it, in fact, you'll probably even see it in your wireless configuration. It'll be one of those things that you can also work with to be able to use those things as well. Well, we're through 4 of the questions. I think we're going pretty well so far, but I want to take a moment and tell you about some different kinds of technology. This one is from my friends at Gts Learning. Gts Learning is a company that does nothing but create training materials for you to pass your certification exam. They work remarkably closely with the folks at CompTIA. They are certified CompTIA providers, and everything that they create, they're a platinum partner from CompTIA. Everything they create gets a stamp of approval that it is official quality seal on top of all of those pieces. And one of those things they created was a way for you to work through your Network Plus certification and hands-on work. This is one of the questions I get all the time from folks that say, I've got these performance-based questions on the exam. And these performance-based questions may pop open a console. The CompTIA created a video that you can watch that takes you through what some of these look like. They could be fill in the blanks. They could be matching. You can put things in order. But the one I think that everybody worries about is problems that happen at the command line. And how do I use this? So what the folks at GTS Learning have created is this technology called Freestyle. And Freestyle has learning labs that you can get along with it. Freestyle itself is online books, online sample questions. People all the time say, where can I get some great sample questions? Well, how about some that have been certified by CompTIA? They have those out on the Freestyle with GTS Learning, but they have these live practice labs that you can also work with. I'm going to open mine up and give you a feel for what this looks like. Here are the live practice labs. I'm going to just start one up. You've probably seen me work with the Network Plus labs. They have some on configuring a network adapter, IP address configuration, ARP and packet analysis, DHCP servers and clients, routing, TCP and port scanning, name resolution. You know, we just did name resolution, so let's choose that. And what it does is on this side of the screen are a bunch of different devices. There's a server. There is, a server, a client, a gateway, a router, and LAMP. That's a Linux device that's also got probably a web server inside of it. We can select a server. I'm going to turn on that device. You can see it turns orange on this side. I'm going to choose the client. I know I'm bouncing around here, but I'll stop doing that. Turn on the gateway, turn on my router. I'm just going to power them up. So this is almost like having all of this equipment sitting in your room. Let's go over and power up the router. Let's power up the server. Let's power up the client, except you didn't have to configure anything. There's no power, real power to turn on. These devices do exist somewhere out in the cloud. So think of this as your cloud-based piece to be able to do this. And they even have these network maps on the side, so you can see exactly how this has been configured on the network side. On this one, we're going to capture, prepare, and deploy this. We're going to do lab diagrams with this. Here's the lab I've got running, and the piece is set up with this for name resolution. As these servers boot, then they'll be accessible to me. And I simply connect to them with a remote desktop session across this. I don't even have to install any additional software because this is using HTML5 in my browser. So the browser can already use these. For instance, my gateway got configured and I could go into the gateway and learn more about it. It's got my credentials there, administrator, and then you've got the password settings with that piece. And it pops open and gives me access to these devices as they're going. This is one of the things I can use to learn everything about the Network Plus exam. I could learn my IPv4 configurations. I can capture packets that are being created by another device. I can learn more about the routing and the routing tables, which again, you have to know for your Network Plus certification. But all of this being on this view allows me to now step through the lab, and you'll get step-by-step screenshots of exactly what you do in this lab and where it goes. So when you connect to a device, let's start working with this. I would love to work with those pieces of the server and get them running. Now I've got a way to connect and look at that piece. This is where I think I don't have the HTML5 on mine with the browser. I need to change over to the Java side. So we'll see if I can run some of those and get them running. Here's the client, for instance. We're going to boot up this client and get it running. My virtual side will then pop up a bunch of screens that look like this. So I've got, in fact, there's a great shot of one of me running the virtual lab with my Wireshark. So I started up on one side, ran my Wireshark configuration, and it was great. I was able to work with those pieces and get it running. The way that I run it on my machine is I try to get things running in multiple things running at one time. But then if I have to step away, it's still there waiting for me when I come back. So another one of the benefits I have is I don't have to worry so much about the time that I put into it, configuring operating system. Did I really do that? It's really the NetLabs. So I'm going to come back to the NetLabs and show you another one. I'm going to let this finish booting up because there's some great things in the NetLabs I want to be able to do later on. And maybe we'll use one to answer one of the questions that we have. And we'll go through that piece and have a look. But in the meantime, I have another question for you. Oh, by the way, if you want to know more about this, you can try them for free for an hour. You can run your own labs and get them running for free, which is really great. I like to be able to connect to the labs and run them myself. Maybe you don't know if they're for you. It's $99 to access for a year, but maybe you want to try it yourself. This is a great way to do it. Go in for an hour and see if it works for you. If it works, that's great. If you think you could set it up and do your own lab and you like to do that thing, well, that's fine too. I think that's I'm fine with that as well. Do it whatever makes sense for you. But if you're somebody who likes to really get into the server itself and start working with the server and really not worry about installing an operating system, setting up a network, or any of those things, you can connect to the server yourself on the NetLabs. And for instance, here we are in Windows. It's just in my browser. So I'm running the desktop. This is Windows Server 2008 R2 Enterprise. Sets up my desktop, and now I can perform the same functions that they have there. In fact, they have a Wireshark running on this one. Let's start up Wireshark. I didn't have to install Wireshark. It's just sitting there waiting for me. Just wanted to give you a feel for that. I know I've kind of droned on about this, and I wanted to give you a demonstration of this piece and really show you how easy it is to use and get it running and be able to work with it. And you can go from turning it on to capturing packets just like that. Here's Wireshark. Let's start up some packet captures, and we're already getting packet captures from here. Here's a spanning tree and ARP. So there they go. We're capturing all these pieces coming from there. And of course, the decodes are in here too, just as if you're running Wireshark on your own machine. It's all there waiting for you. It looks like it's a Cisco device that's running the spanning tree protocol. You can see everything in those packet captures. So it's a nice way to work with those. I just wanted to give you a feel for how fun that is to get in and work with those pieces. And of course, you can see all about those and much more at professormesser.com/netlabs. Give it a shot. It's got some good things in there. Oh, I've got more questions for you. Get your QR code readers ready. The question I have for you is, which of these cable categories supports a maximum of 100 megabits per second with Ethernet? Very specific to that. We do want to be careful about separating out the category of something with a speed. Category does not equal speed. The category of a cable is associated with how the cable is made. And what we've said, if you make a cable this way, then we can run these things over it. And the example here is, since Ethernet is so broadly used as a networking topology, that's a very good example to use when trying to compare different categories of cable. So I want to know from you, which cable categories support a maximum of 100 megabit per second Ethernet. And when you start looking at this, one of the things that you will find, especially as you start really breaking it out, is there's a lot of options there for looking at those pieces. The options that you will have available is Category 3, Category 5, Category 5E, or Category 6. So you've got a lot to choose from in your list. I think that if you go to the QR code is there, but if you go to govote.at and go to 11776, you will absolutely see that piece. So start looking at those. Again, categories of cable is another thing that you need to know from your certification exam. So it's in the exam objectives, and it is one that you'll need to know. I'll pop over and let you see those options there. Which of these cable categories support a maximum of 100 megabits per second Ethernet? So you'll not only need to know certain categories. You don't have to know every single category that exists in the world, but there is a subset that you will need to know. And interestingly enough, I think this is almost all of them. You need to know one more other than this: Category 3, Category 5, Category 5E, or Category 6. This is kind of goes back a ways. Back in the day, we were first installing Ethernet and getting it running. A lot of it was over coax. We were running 10 megabits per second over 10 base 2. And then we upgraded and did a little bit of twisted pair. But right about that time, we came out with 100 megabit Ethernet, which was blazing fast. And that's the time when everybody started upgrading their cable infrastructures. Let's see what you guys thought everyone was upgrading to. Oh, gotcha on this one. Got a mix of different, but who's right? Who is right? Are the Category 3 people smart, or Category 5 or the Category 5E? Category 6, nobody answered that one. So as we go back in history and we look at this, we started putting in and having all these wiring. And a lot of the wiring that we had in a lot of places was Category 3, because we were running 10 megabit Ethernet. A lot of people were running token ring, 4 megabit token ring. There's a lot of token ring, especially in financial organizations, insurance companies, a lot of token ring. And we were using a big fat Type 1 cable for token ring. And then we realized we could do it over twisted pair. Everybody was running Cat 3. Category 3 is also what a lot of people had their telephones running on. But when we came out with 100 megabit, or we wanted to go faster, than the 4 megabit per second token ring. We wanted to go 100 megabit Ethernet. We had to upgrade from category 3 to category 5. So that's the answer to the question on this one, is category 5 and being able to work with that. Category 5 is the one that we use for so long. It's almost the default. We say, hey, I need some Cat 5. We need to put some Cat 5 in the wall. Somebody give me some Cat 5. I recently ran some new cabling. And in the new cabling, I was trying to decide, do I need Cat 5 or Cat 6? But there's a cost difference. When you move from Cat 5 to Cat 5e to Cat 6, it costs more because there's a tighter set of requirements for that particular cabling. And when you start working with Cat 5 and trying to determine what you need to be able to run those, I mean, there's a lot of things that you have to consider. And if you're needing to do 100 megabit Ethernet and no more, category 5 is the right answer for you, because the category 5 cable will support 100 megabit Ethernet on it, but it will not not necessarily support other types of speeds on there. Doesn't mean the other speeds aren't going to work, but the other speeds are ones that aren't supported over that. So you could put up category 3 and try to run 100 megabit Ethernet. If it's a short little cable, maybe it will work, but it's certainly not something you would support in that environment and being able to use those. I think that's where I run into other pieces too, and working with those and trying to get those running as well as working with others. If you were running Cat 5e, excuse me a moment. It's not taking phone calls, has me talking a lot. Category 5e goes all the way up to supporting speeds that for 1 gig Ethernet. You want to do 1 gig Ethernet, that's a great way to do it, is over the Cat 5e. Category 6 supports, and there's some 10 gig you can do over Cat 5e as well, very short distances. There's also, it's category 6 that does 10 gig. It's 55 meters. And Cat 6 will certainly do. Cat 6A is the full 100 meters. And when you're looking at wiring, that's the challenge you have for your exam. And you can see how easy it is to kind of trip up between the categories and the cable types. Get your flashcards and learn category 3, category 5, category 5e, category 6, category 6A. Those are the ones that will be on your exam so that you can go through those pieces and get them clear. We hit 10 gig on category 6. So those of you that did not answer, you thought category 6, that was, we can do 10 gig on category 6, certainly not maxing out at 100 megabit Ethernet. And certainly the distances are a little bit different between 6 and 6A, but that's a great way to start thinking about how I work with speeds on Ethernet and compare them to those categories of cable. In the chat room, you're working with those and if you're doing gigabit now and you're running through those speeds, you're doing a lot with Cat 6. I didn't put Cat 6 in because I wasn't planning to do any 10 gig, and it saved me some money. So I could just put in Cat 5 and do something that would provide me with some faster speeds. Cat 5e, for instance, being able to work with that. Let's do some more questions. We've got more to go through. We're coming up on a little bit time left, and since we're on kind of this view of standards and being able to work with standards, I've got another question for you regarding that. This one regarding Ethernet and the maximum length. If you were going to run 1000 base T, so if I'm going to run 1000 base T, which is an Ethernet standard that you would work with. And by the way, the standards, if you wanted to download the IEEE standards and read through them, they are available for you to read. It's got all of these different standards in there. 10 base 2, 10 base T, 100 base T, 1000 base T, all the fiber standards, all the things that we read about in the Network Plus exam, they're in that standard, and it describes exactly the type of infrastructure you should be using for this. And there is a maximum length that is allowed or in the standardized for 1000 base T. Hit the QR code, go to govote.at and go to 502631. Is the length 100 meters, 2 kilometers, 55 meters, or 10 kilometers? That's some numbers we're going to have to know to be able to work with those. So what is, if you're running 1000 base T, what are your limitations? One of the great things about these standards is they tell you exactly how the standard should work. They tell you exactly the type of cabling you're going to need to support this standard, and they tell you exactly the length of cabling that will fall under this standard. And so that becomes very useful to be able to work with that. So what is the use here? What is the length that we would need to worry about for 1000 base T and being able to work with those? This is another one that allows, or that when you're thinking about it, that you have to know. It's kind of rote memorization. But if you work a lot with the cabling, you work a lot with putting in 1000 base T. And if you map this out as a hint, there is 1000 would be a gig. So this would be 1 gigabit speeds over baseband, which is the frequencies we're using in this case. It's not multiple frequencies, which would be broadband. It's a single frequency, which is baseband. And T generally in the standards means twisted pair. Doesn't necessarily mean that. So there's a few things. So if we're running twisted pair, we've given you that little hint. You might be able to maybe take a few of these and throw them out. In fact, one example of that is twisted pair. It's a copper cable. You probably wouldn't go 10 kilometers with it. So we can already take that one out of the list. 55 meters is a standard available in Cat 6 for 10 gig. This is not 10 gig. This is 1 gig. 1000 base T is 1 gigabit per second. 2 kilometers, again, that cable's just a little too long for that. Most of you got it absolutely right, is 100 meters to be able to have that maximum length of 1000 base T. There is a lot of things to know about the standards, and there are so many standards. If you were to download the IEEE standards, there are tons of them. And in the Network Plus exam, you only need to know a subset of those. So go to the exam objectives. It's a pretty big subset, granted, but you can start picking things out of this. If there's a T, it's probably twisted pair. If there's an F, it's probably fiber. If it has a 10, a 100, a 1000, those are the speeds for that particular standard. So when you look at a standard, maybe even one you've never seen before, you can almost pick out certain characteristics of that. It doesn't work that way 100% of the time, but on the standards, they try to stay somewhere in those particular standards or those particular naming conventions anyway to get that going. We've got time for at least one more question. Let's move away from the topology and let's move into IP. Let's start working with maybe some TCP/IP settings. So think about your IP and think about things that you might be working with on your TCP/IP, and grab your QR code readers and see if you can answer this question, which is, which of these is an RFC 1918 address? And if you go to govote.at and use the code 891713, you have 4 options available. So a 1918 address, is it 20.10.254.1? Is it 168.192.11.20? Is it 172.30.155.7? Or is it 127.0.0.1? Oh, there's a lot to choose from there. So we've got some, first, again, it's a multi-step question. This is what I designed these to do. Multi-step question means that you have to first know what RFC 1918 is, and I've got to figure that piece out. And then you have to work through what is the addresses associated with that. Somehow there's an address associated with RFC 1918. Which one of these would it be? And if we look at the options here, there they are, the 20.10.254.1. Zoom up on those a little bit so you can see them a little better. 168.192.11.20, 172.30.155.7, or 127.0.0.1. Go to govote.at to 891713 to answer this question. There is a lot you have to know about addressing on the Network Plus exam. If you go to that exam, you'll see that there are tons of things that you need to know about subnetting, about addressing, about classes of IP addresses. And this kind of fits into some of those questions regarding IP. In fact, RFC 1918 is one that when you start doing networking all the time, you use constantly. It's a set of standards that we have embraced in the industry, and we just use this address all the time. We use RFC 1918 all the time when you're working with those pieces. We've got about 18 responses in. Let's see what you think of an RFC 1918 address. And the result is, across the board. Oh, I finally hit one here at the end where people were scratching their head over this one. RFC 1918 is in the Network Plus exam objectives. Take a sip here. The RFC 1918 lays out sections of addresses that are used for internal addresses. These internal addresses are as compared to external addresses, and they were created because we have, and we still have, these very limited number of external addresses available out on the internet. The only way to communicate with somebody over the internet is by their IP address. Now the internet has blown up and we've run out of IP addresses. So one of the ways to open up more addresses and have them available is on the inside of your network. You have private addresses, and then you have a firewall or a router that does network address translation that translates the internal addresses to external and communicates out on the internet. And on the other side, wherever that user is, it probably does the same thing. So if you've got a modem at home that you're connecting via DSL, you're connecting via your cable modem. If you're working in an enterprise, every enterprise you'll run into, a very, very, very small number of organizations don't do this these days, is they will do network address translation to a private IPv4 address on the inside of the network. And there are three ranges. The first range is 10.0.0.0 through 10.255.255.255. And I didn't have any of those 10 dot numbers in this list, so none of these are that particular RFC 19 address range. But there's some other ranges. Another range is one you hear all the time, 192.168.0.0 through 192.168.255.255. So none of these start with 192.168, although kind of tripped you up. This one was a trick question. You won't get one quite so tricky on your exam. 168.192. No, that's backwards. I said 192.168, not 168.192. So that's why that particular one is incorrect. 20 is not in the list at all. 20.10, again, I kind of switched them. If 10 was at the beginning, you'd have it. Another range right in the middle is 172.16 through 172.31. And indeed, 172.30 certainly fits into that range. If you answered 172.30.155.7, you would be absolutely right. That is an RFC 1918 address. And just for fun, I threw in a loopback address, which we always hear about, which is 127.anything. We always say 127.0.0.1, but it could be 127.127.127.127 if we wanted. It would go to the loopback address inside of your computer. That is an internal loopback that's used on every IP device. It is not an internal address. It's not considered an RFC 1918 address. It was around well before RFC 1918. It's part of the IP specification, and that's why 12 of you answered that, but you were not correct. I finally fooled some people. Gotcha. Yeah, I'm a little sneaky. That one was a little bit sneaky. I did throw that one in there, but I had to do something about that. Plus, maybe we learned something today. You never learn anything until you get something wrong. So we can always take that back and think about it as something that maybe we can work with and improve on for the times that we're planning to take our Network Plus certification. I think that's certainly something we should consider and work towards with that piece. Well, we've come to the end of our first hour. If you're watching and you'd like to, we do an after show, but if you're watching this for credit for your Network Plus continuing education units, send me an email with the terms RFC 1918 in it. That's your special code to be able to get me to send you back an email that certifies that you did indeed watch this. I think that's another way to continuing education, certainly important, and it gives you credits if you're using that. I think most people probably will just take the Security Plus exam. You don't have to do anything like that, but I'm willing to give the credits out as well. As long as CompTIA will take them, I'm willing to do that. But until the next time we do our formal Network Plus certification, you can always look and see if the study guide might be an option for you at professormesser.com/netsg. You can, of course, follow what we do on YouTube. And if you've always just wanted to give back to the site, this is a great way to do it. Just subscribe to my YouTube channel. I mention this on every study group, and I say, you don't realize how important it is to subscribe to my YouTube channel. You really don't understand how important it is. If you don't want to get updates from me, you can always turn that off. but subscribing to the channel it's remarkable the power that has with YouTube and with Google. It really does help support what we do here. You can follow me on Twitter and watch those pieces as well. A lot of you have said you wanted a daily Network Plus pop quiz. I'd really love to have the time to do that. I don't currently, but I have some plans. I have things I want to be able to do. So certainly that may be coming. A good way to find out is on Twitter. You can do /Google Plus. You can do /Facebook. Again, if you want to know more about the GTS Learning Live Labs, you can go to GTS Learning website at professormesser.com/netlabs. That, of course, also goes to help the site. They help sponsor what we do here. They're great people. I love working with them. And, of course, thanks to all of you. We would not be able to do these study groups if we didn't have you here taking care of all of the details of what we're doing with these study groups. We really, really do appreciate what's going on there. So we will have the after show. So those of you watching, feel free to stand by. Otherwise, we appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Professor Messer Network Plus Study Group.